Okay, welcome to Asana Lab. This is going to be a very different kind of Asana Lab, as you can already see, because we're going to be talking a lot about the feet. I decided that you will just not see very much of me except for my feet today. So we're going to talk a little bit about just different, energetics and dynamics, a little bit of anatomy of the feet, but it's a gentle introduction to feet anatomy, because feet are very, very complex. Feet also don't just move, in one direction, pointing, flexing. They move out to the sides, they move in, they move around. So in all, they move in basically all planes of motion. And because of that, it's also really tricky to sort of speak even anatomically about feet, because anytime I'm moving in one direction, I'm actually moving in multiple directions at the same time. We can talk more about that later if we have time, but let's just kind of go over the basics of how we're going to interact with our feet, maybe in our asana practice, right? So first things first, let's have a look at the foot. Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. No, I'm just kidding. That's an old reference. But anyway, have a look at your feet and notice that mine need to be moisturized. No, just kidding. How about this? You look at your foot while I look at my foot. That sounds more fair. But anyway, I want you to have a look at the sole of your foot and find the knuckle that joins the big toe to the rest of the foot. So find the pad of the big toe. Some of us will have like a little bit of rougher skin there because that comes into more contact with the floor. And I just want you to actually kind of rub and push and kind of wake up that area of the foot by bringing physical sensation and physical touch to it. A lot of us have a better time becoming aware of a physical portion of the body, it just by touch sensation. So just by having some contact with the outside world, it's easier for us to bring our consciousness or our awareness to that place. So kind of just like waking up that part of the foot. And then find the pad of the little toe. So underneath where the little toe separates from the rest of the foot. Again, some of us have bigger calluses than others there. Mainly probably from ballet, honestly. But anyway, nonetheless, don't harsh on your calluses. They're there to protect the skin, so it's perfectly fine, a protective layer of skin there. So bringing some awareness to that place. And then look back here at the heel. So the heel is kind of this bulbous shape, right? You can see it's almost kind of like a circle back there. Now, if we were looking at the heel as we would look at like a clock, let's say, say that whichever part is facing most upwards, let's say that's 12 o'clock and then 3 o'clock, depending on which foot you're looking at, you might be going a different direction. Your 3 o'clock might be up here or it might be here, depending which foot you're looking at. But anyway, 3 o'clock, then we'll have 6 o'clock, then we'll have 9 o'clock. Okay? And again, depending which foot you're looking at, these two numbers might change, but nonetheless. So touch the 12 o'clock, right? The upper part. And again, bring some consciousness, bring some awareness, bring some aliveness. Hello, inner heel. I made you coffee. Let's go. No. Ooh, it's a silly day, clearly. And then look at 6 o'clock And again, kind of just bring some touch sensation into it so that we're really, really bringing some conscious energy into that area. So now those 4 points that we made contact with, so we defined the pad of the big toe, pad of the little toe, the inner heel, the outer heel. We sometimes when we take yoga classes, we might hear yoga teachers say like the 4 points on the foot, or sometimes they say the 4 corners of the foot, which feet aren't exactly rectangles, so they're much more curvy. So it's hard for me to conceive of what a corner of the foot is. But I guess if you sort of roughly made your foot into some sort of rectangle, yeah, you could maybe think of those as the 4 corners of the feet. Anyway, it's just helpful to know what yoga teachers are speaking about when they say the 4 corners of the feet. So we're going to define those 4 corners, whatever you might call them or not. And then let's turn the foot so that the sole of the foot is on the floor. You can just place the foot there in front of you. And we want to feel contact between the pad of the big toe, the pad of the little toe, the inner heel, the 12 o'clock, and the outer heel, the 6 o'clock. So those 4 points we want to feel in contact with the floor. Now, feel what happens to your foot when you lift all 5 toes away from the floor. But keep in mind, you want to keep this pad of the big toe pressing down. So in other words, don't lift the toes up so much that it also lifts the other parts of the feet up. Just lift the 5 toes, pad of the big toe still touching the floor, pad of the little toe still touching the floor, inner heel, outer heel still touching the floor. And then relax them down. And then again, lift them up and relax them down. And lift them up and relax them down. So I find when I do that, and it's pretty easy to see on my feet, maybe it's easier even to see what's happening on my foot than to feel what's happening in your foot, or vice versa, depending on your experience. What I feel is I feel the top of the arch of the foot lifting up when I lift my toes. I feel that the inner part of the foot, the sole of the foot, it kind of lifts a little further upwards away from the floor. In fact, if you're uncertain, you can do just what I've just done and stick a finger right into the center of that archway there. And as you lift the toes, maybe you can feel that there's like even just a little bit more space in that direction, right? In the upwards direction. My foot also kind of shortens from where the big toe and the inner heel are. Like if, you know, it's almost like a caterpillar crawling across the floor, where there's that moment where the center of the caterpillar lifts up and those 2 points kind of scrunch together. If you watch the distance between my big toe and my heel, it's almost like they pull towards each other. So that shape of the foot, when we have the toes lifting up, that's sort of the strongest and most stable and rigid structure that the foot can have. If you relax everything, the foot is more mobile, it's a little bit softer, it's easier to move around, the arch is a little bit more flattened, the whole shape of the foot is a little bit more flattened and longer and spread out. And we need both of those aspects of the foot. In fact, walking is made possible by having those 2 attributes of the foot, right? When we walk, it's quite important for us to have the strength part of the foot, right? We need this arch to almost act like a spring to push off of the floor, and the foot needs to be very stable to do that. But then when we land, when we're walking, we want to be able to land with some shock absorption. We want to be able to have that soft aspect of the foot that aspect of the foot that sort of flattens out, softens, and is also a little bit more movable. We wouldn't want to land on a hard, structured, rigid foot, right? So our feet are basically magic. If you can't tell, I'm really into how magical our feet are. So, keeping in mind that we need both components of the foot in order to have healthy movement and, to be able to walk and to be able to do asana, it's also important to kind of know when we need the stronger aspect of the foot to be working in our favor and when we want the softer aspect of our foot working in our favor. It's also important to start to recognize that most of us will have a habit or a tendency in one direction or another. So some of us may have very naturally high arches where the inner arch just sits really high even when the foot is relaxed. And that might make it challenging for this kind of person to find some of the softness which we need for balancing and for smooth transitions, right? But a lot of us, in fact, I would say it's probably more common for people to be sort of the other way. You'll notice some of us will have a flatter arch. Some of us might even have the appearance of the foot kind of rolling a little bit more inwards, so towards the inner edge of the foot. And in that case, we want to work more on finding the stability and the strength and that sort of inner lift, as well as that, very importantly, that connectedness through the 4 points of the feet. Like, if the foot tends towards the inside a little bit too much, then it might be hard to find a connection through the outer edge of the foot at all, right? And then to be able to bring awareness to it so that we're sort of balancing those two components. So even as I discuss the different attributes of the foot today, I want you to sort of be aware, do I generally have, more of a tendency to have kind of a lift? Like usually the appearance of the foot is sort of more rigid and stronger, and you'll see that more architectural look on the foot. Or do I have a tendency to sort of flatten out the inner arch, or do I have a tendency to roll in at the inner arch? So that way you'll know kind of which direction to move in order to find a better balance. So stand up. It would help if you have a block or a belt nearby. We'll use that in a minute. But go ahead and stand with your feet a little bit apart and just roll from side to side. I'm sort of twisting my upper body a little bit, almost like a young child that's kind of waiting somewhat impatiently and bored for a parent or a friend or something. So I'm kind of rocking side to side. And notice, you can look at my feet or you can look at your own feet. Notice how the feet kind of roll. As I go to one side, one of the outer edges is on the floor, one of the inner edges on the floor. As I roll to the other side, one outer edge, one inner edge is on the floor. And then see if you can find the center. And what I mean by that is not only do you want to find the center in terms of having even amount of weight on the right foot and the left foot, but I also want you to try to find a balance between the outer edge and inner edge of the left foot, the outer edge and inner edge of the right foot. So that not only are we balanced right to left, but we're also balanced side to side. Then go ahead and rock forward onto the toes and rock back onto the heels, forward on the toes, back on the heels, forward on the toes, back on the heels. Do that a few times. This is more like maybe an adult who's bored. Isn't that interesting? This put me in kind of a different metaphorical part in my brain. Kind of interesting to study how different people move. But anyway, that's the vibe I'm getting now. So, and then again, come to the center. So now not only do we want even weight on the right and left, on the inner outer, but we also want to balance between the forward and the back. For now, keep the knees just a little bit soft. There can be a tendency, just to warn you, if one hyperextends the knees, then the weight will tend to pitch a little bit backwards. And you can see that when I pitch my weight a little bit backwards, I have more of a tendency to have a little stress in the top of my foot. I have more of a tendency to need to grip or grab with my toes in order to counterbalance. So for now, just keep a little softness in the knees. We'll speak about extension of the knees and hyperextension maybe on a different day. Okay, so now lift the toes up, just like we did when we were on the floor. Lift the toes up, and again, find those 4 points that we discovered on the feet. Find those 4 points on each foot pressing into the floor. Then spread the toes out as best as you can. Reach the big toes towards each other and the little toes away, even if they don't necessarily spread on their own just yet. And then relax. And then again, lift up the toes. Now see if you can keep some of this structure, some of this strength and upward lift in the feet, and relax the toes down. So it's tricky because usually when our toes are down, we want to let the feet relax. But we want to practice having strength in the feet with the toes relaxed. At first, this might be challenging. You might find that when you lift the arches up, there's more of a tendency to grip in the feet because, when we're learning to use new muscles, usually we just grab all the muscles around it that we can find. But see if you can start to separate the strength that you're using to lift the inner feet up and the strength that it takes to lift the toes up. See if you can start to separate those things. Good. So we want to keep strengthening that inner arch if you tend to have softer, more rolled in feet, or you tend to have flatter arches. If your arches are already quite high, then I actually don't want you to keep strengthening the arch. I want you to kind of focus a little bit more on letting the inner edge soften a little bit towards the floor. It might feel weird at first, but just try to feel a little more softening towards the inner foot. But that's usually more rare case than not having enough strength in the inner arch. So if you're the exception, just know you're the exception and keep working accordingly. Okay, we're going to use a belt for this next part. So make like a little loop in your belt, maybe 8 or 10 inches. It doesn't have to be big. And you're going to step both feet into the loop and just separate your feet enough that your outer ankles can touch the fabric of the belt. So now sometimes, again, half the project